Hello, I'm John Feldt. You know, most of Texas was pretty quiet last week, but there was some interesting type of pattern with snowfall over El Paso and parts of the northwest part of the state that extended into parts of the Oklahoma Panhandle, as well as into parts of Kansas. Now, you might remember that I mentioned last week we're in either a neutral or a slightly positive Arctic oscillation, and with that we get a split jet stream. Now, the northerly jet stream will keep the cold air to our north for the most part. The southerly jet stream is the one we need to look at as far as possible precipitation. Now, last week, despite the snow, it was fairly quiet. This week, there's going to be a very strong and vigorous pulse of energy pushing out of the southwest U.S. in that jet stream, moving across parts of Texas and then across Arkansas up towards the Ohio Valley. It looks like there could be some heavy precipitation in the form of rain over about the eastern third of the state of Texas, large part of Arkansas, and parts of Oklahoma. It looks like it's going to be to the south and southeast of Kansas for the most part. I'm going to be talking about precipitation this week and an outlook for next week on this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook. Let's start off by taking a look at the precipitation around the area. Actually, it was snow in the form of rain and snow over the last week. El Paso had an interesting and unusual snow event, and that extended into the far northern part of the state of Texas as far as the far western panhandle of Oklahoma. Elsewhere, you can see that there were pockets of rainfall. That's an area of green, and many were from a half inch to an inch over the eastern part of the state. And along the immediate coast, there was some very heavy rain, but that hugged just the immediate coast. I think a more significant note as far as being widespread was over the eastern part of Oklahoma, where there was an average of anywhere from a half inch to a little bit over an inch of rain over a large part of eastern Oklahoma, which was very dry, so it needed that rain in that area. Now, you know, for many, many months now, I've been talking about widespread drought and rainfall deficits. I think one way to get out of a drought is not just that extreme event, but is actually to get more moderate or modest amounts of rain. And what we're seeing here is more of a pot-marked type pattern here for percent of normal. Greens are blues and reds, blues being above normal, reds below normal. And what we saw last week were areas of significantly above normal over the western part of the state, that area in Oklahoma that was a bit above normal, and then at the same time areas that didn't receive any rain. So I think what we're doing is beginning to erode where, you know, the drought, the core of drought, we're beginning to get some areas that are improving a bit and other areas not much at all. So we still need rain, we still need a lot of rain, but at least we're seeing some signs of gradual improvement here. Now, as far as snow goes, I said snow did impact parts of Texas and Oklahoma and definitely Kansas. Purple are the lighter amounts of snow, and you can see that the western part and the far northwest part of Texas, the western part of Oklahoma, and definitely almost all of Kansas received snow last week. The heavier snows are that area of orange or yellow and green. Everything else is light. And we see the snow cover on the ground. Actually, parts of far northwest Texas and western Oklahoma have a bit of snow on the ground. That probably won't last real long. But the deeper shades of blue over Kansas are more significant snow, and that could last longer. But despite some welcome rain, the story is still drought, and these are moisture percentiles, soil moisture percentiles. And we still see these pockets of deep red indicating very dry soils. I think since the last week or so, the most notable improvement was over eastern Oklahoma, where there's been some improvement in that region, but it's still very dry. And I think just about every place from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and western Arkansas could definitely use a number of inches of rain. Matter of fact, the amount of inches of rain needed to get us back to sort of neutral, and that depends on how fast it comes down and things like that, would be anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain. Okay, now I've talked about the Arctic oscillation throughout the winter months, and I'll point this out again, is that we've had pretty much 3 different regions here, or regimes of Arctic oscillation. The first one was in November, from the early November through the mid to latter part of November. That was a positive phase of the Arctic oscillation. Then as we got into November through mid-December, we got into that prolonged period of a negative phase Arctic oscillation. And now we're going back into a neutral or positive phase, which I've indicated by number 3 here. That'll go into the middle part of the month of January, then possibly going back into a negative. So you can see we have these natural fluctuations, and each one of them causes some type of change in precipitation patterns across our region. So the next one, we'll have to see what that brings as we get from that positive more into a negative. Now I wanted to show here one of the models here and give you some idea of what's expected. This is sort of the big picture here, and what I'm going to show here is sort of a walking through a loop here, and what we'll see here, this is valid later this week, and what we have here is we have the jet stream digging in from the southwest. Now what's driving the jet stream over the next week or two is this vortex of cyclonic low up here. This is very cold Arctic air, and what we're getting is a split jet stream. We're going to have a northern jet stream here, and we're going to have a southern jet stream down here. And I mentioned last week that that southern jet stream last week wasn't that active. Well, this week it's going to be much more active. So this is the pattern that we're watching here as this ejects out. Colder air will be held up here by this northerly jet stream. So north of this area, it's going to be quite cold. So if we go a little bit further ahead, this is the areas of yellow here are pockets of energy. Here's the first one that ejects out, and that's going to bring some significant precipitation to eastern Texas, perhaps part of Oklahoma and Arkansas, and then you can sort of see it dissipates as it gets into the central part of the state. So it's going to be most intense in Oklahoma, parts of Louisiana, Texas, into Arkansas, and then as it dissipates. But here we go again. We have another pocket of energy coming out late in the week, and here's the second one. That's a little bit further to the north. So we do have one pocket of energy pulling out this week, and that is going to give us that chance of rain. I'll just sort of run through here a loop again, give you some idea. Here we go. So here's the first one coming through this week, and that's going to give that chance of rain. And here's another one behind it, but that's going to be further up to the north. As long as we have this southwest flow over the state, it's going to at least give us a better chance of precipitation than what we've had in the past. Okay, and even looking a little bit further down the road to 6 to 10 day, here's the jet stream 6 to 10 days out, and I wanted to point out it's still that digging in the west, digging trough in the west, and then a southwesterly flow. That could bring some enhanced precipitation over the eastern part of Texas as that energy ejects out and then pushes further in. So that energy is going to come out in here and then pull up in the area. So I think not necessarily West Texas, but on this side of that jet, definitely a possibility of some enhanced precipitation. Now, if we look at potential vulnerabilities, I show this not that often recently because it's been so dry, but this is upper soil moisture anomalies or actually percent of saturation. And blues are areas that are wet. So when we get additional rain over those areas, these are areas that could receive enhanced runoff. And the blues here over Arkansas and Louisiana are indicating quite a bit more saturation than further west. So just keep in mind with the rain this week, as that moves from central parts of Texas that can use quite a bit of rain, and over Arkansas, you're going to get a lot more runoff over Louisiana and Arkansas because those upper soils are saturated. This is a type of image I'll be talking about a lot more when we get into flooding versus what we've seen with drought. So here's the rainfall forecast for this week. Actually, this is the most rain potential for parts of Texas that we've seen for quite some time. The question will be how far into the central part of the state goes. Now, the eastern part of the state's been receiving quite a bit more rain than the west. This looks to me like there is the possibility of the central part of the state receiving more rain than there's been in the past. then pushing up into Arkansas. Now keep in mind, Arkansas has been quite a bit of wet, so most of the rain in this area is going to soak in, but as it gets up into this area, you will have some enhanced runoff in that region. If we look a little bit further, I mentioned that flow, the 6 to 10 day jet stream. Remember that alignment? Well, here's that alignment of precipitation, and it does show that there is a possibility of another system later this week or in this weekend over the eastern part of the state. Maybe a bit, it looks to me like it'd be sort of bumped off a bit further to the east. Thus, we expect soil moisture change for this week. Significant improvement of soil moisture in this area in the darker blue over maybe the eastern third of Texas and the southeast part of Oklahoma, and definitely over Arkansas. We see improvement of soil moisture. Even the central and western part, those are much more modest amounts of improvement. But I think what's notable here, that by this time next week, we could have significantly wetter soils, an improvement of drought conditions over the eastern quarter of Texas, maybe even the eastern third of the state. So the trends and threats for this upcoming week: heavy rain, 3 inches or more, I've indicated here. Even widespread 1 to 3 inches in the blue, and anywhere in that dashed line could get at least some welcome rain. So much of the southeast or south central U.S. should receive significant rain this week in those areas of blue and red. Now, it doesn't extend much into Kansas. It looks like it's going to be east of that area. So in Kansas, quite a bit drier, as well as northern parts of Oklahoma. So the takeaway points: active southerly jet this week. A low ejects out of the southwest U.S., bringing significant precipitation over eastern Texas, Louisiana, and parts of Arkansas. Thank you for listening to this week's Weekly Water Outlook. I'll be talking with you again next week.